Welcome to Mass Talk. My name is Amy Palmerino, and I'm your host for this monthly program. Mass Talk is a program about access centers throughout Massachusetts and what access corporations are all about. Today I have a panel of guests to talk about what public access television is, how it affects you, how it affects your communities, and your current access center. We'll also be talking about state legislation and talking about the effects that it will have on community television throughout your area. So with me today, I have a panel of guests. To my left, I have Paul Berg, who is the Executive Director of New TV in Newton, Massachusetts, as well as a board member of Mass Access, which is the Massachusetts chapter of the Alliance for Community Media. I also have Keith Tebow, who's the Director of Fall River Community Television. He's also a board member of the Northeast region of the Alliance for Community Media. We have Bill August, who is an attorney representing municipalities and access corporations in cable franchise renewals and other legal matters, as well as Nancy Richard, who's the Executive Director for PAC TV in Plymouth, Massachusetts, who's a board member of the National Alliance for Community Media. So thank you all for being here with me today. And those of you that are watching us on Access Television, so you may have an idea of at least that there are channels in your area. What we're going to talk about first is really what is community television, access television, public access television. We hear these terms quite a bit. Some people call it cable. We need to really talk about what is it and how can people get involved with it, and really what's the history of it? How did this thing all begin?
Well, I guess the oldest story we tell is about how cable began. And cable began with a group of miners in Lansford, Pennsylvania, who couldn't get over-the-air television in their bar because it was behind the mine. And some entrepreneurs there put an antenna up on the hill and ran some wires down to the bar, and lo and behold, the miners could watch their baseball games on television. And that's where cable began. But soon after that, there were people who couldn't get television in Manhattan, and because of the tall buildings, and the same sort of reception, only cable was wired. And shortly after that, some entrepreneurs said, well, hey, there's going to be a lot of extra channels on this cable. Maybe we could show some movies and charge people for it. And lo and behold, HBO was born, and so was cable. And the rest is history, I guess. A lot of history.
So you have cables, right?
Yeah.
So we have cable starting, but how now? We think of access as this soapbox. Okay, so first of all, you have cable starting. People want to watch the movies. They want to see their ball game. But then people want to start making TV. I mean,
Well,
wow.
It kind of started as engineering meets George Stoney, who was a early founder of Access Television, because some of the college professors involved in media and communications learned that the cable that was being used for commercial purposes had more than 3 or 4 channels on it. In fact, they said in awe back in the day, we might even have 12 channels on this cable someday. And at that time, early on in the regulation of cable television, it was established that there ought to be public access to put programming on one or more of the spare channels, so-called spare channels on this cable. And that was, I guess, first memorialized in the Cable Act of '84. Is that right, Bill?
It was, the Cable Act of '84 was the first federal legislation to codify public access. But even prior to '84, it had become a very important part of cable television history. And as Paul said, in the earliest days of cable, even before the federal cable law was adopted, there was a recognition that this technology has a lot of channels. It's the multi-channel medium. It has many more channels than broadcasting. So early on, there was a recognition we have to use these channels for our communities and to serve the public interest. And that really grows out of the earlier roots of broadcasting, because broadcasting technology, even before cable, was governed under a public interest standard, which was written into the original 1934 Communications Act. So there's always been a tradition of looking for the public interest in the electronic media. And even before cable, in broadcasting, it was often said that one of the cornerstone of the public interest is localism. So then as cable technology evolved and developed, there was this tradition of localism, because it's through localism that the technology becomes responsive to the people in the actual service area. And in the cable technology, localism would take the form of community TV channels, public access, and public access is really about getting people from the community into the studio because they're close to the local community issues, so they could do programs about local government, the schools, and provide local information that is not otherwise available.
Okay, so now we're talking about really what it became, you know, what it spun into. You've got people taping their church services. You have people doing, you know, the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and the Garden Club and government things. Now, people are probably asking themselves at home, because not everyone knows, how is this all funded? Like, you know, people, taxes. That's the thing that people always say, oh, it's funded by taxes. Is that true?
No. There are no taxpayer dollars used in public educational and governmental access centers. And maybe I'll explain that a little bit, which is that there have been defined in the federal law and elsewhere 3 kinds of community television or access television that it should be programming for public, educational, and governmental use. And an acronym has developed, PEG, P-E-G. So we in the biz refer to ourselves as PEG centers, and people, you know, wonder, is it really a Margaret Center? Is it that?
Who is
PEG? Who is PEG, and why does she have a television station? But no, the PEG centers are not funded by taxes. Cable companies are for-profit corporations, and they earn their profit by placing their first cables, now fiber, in the public right-of-way. That is the streets of the city and town you live in, the telephone poles that may be owned by the town, undergrounding and things of that type. And for the right to use public property, cable companies pay a cable license fee, as it's called in Massachusetts. Elsewhere it may be called a franchise fee. And this license fee compensates the community for the corporation's use of the public rights of way. And federal law has capped the amount that this can be to 5% of the cable operator's gross annual revenues. That's how PEG centers are funded.
In the town, the revenues from the people, the subscribers of that particular town.
Right.
In some ways, it's more analogous to rent for use of the streets, because the city, also, as Paul is explaining, is the owner of the streets. And as, in fact, the courts have often held that an owner of property, whether it's streets or private property, does have a fiduciary duty, a duty of trust, to seek reasonable compensation for use of that property. And the cable operators are giving something back to the community for the use of the community streets. So it's often analogized to a form of rental payment.
I always use the example that if the town library had a spare room on the first floor and they wanted to get a coffee shop in there and they let Starbucks come in and open up a Starbucks, Starbucks would obviously have to pay rent to the town for the use of that space. And the same is true for the use of the streets and public ways.
Okay, so we know that the funding comes really from the cable company, but if you really want to track it down, it comes from the subscribers themselves,
Well,
in a sense.
I don't know if Bill would call it a quirk of federal law, but federal law gave cable operators the right to pass on this cost directly to consumers. At the same time, we need to mention that most access centers operate 3 channels on a very minimal budget, and the cost to the cable subscriber is dollars and cents per month. It's a small amount of money in terms of the larger cable bill.
And then they receive so much. I mean, what you're watching right now is done at an access center with, there's 3 cameras, people can learn from the community. So what you're talking about really is unbelievable for what the community receives.
We have the statistic from our national organization that access centers every year produce more programming per week than ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox combined. So, and that programming, some of the important programming, you know, if nothing else, the taxpayer wants to know how their taxes are being spent, and we cover the local government. We cover the local school committee meetings and the local alderman or city council or selectmen's meetings, usually every week or every other week, live to the consumers, so that they can sit at home and see exactly what this Prop 2.5 override might be talking about, or things of that type.
Well, I think that we've started to cover the history, but we have so much more to talk about. But right now we need to take a break. So thank you all for being with me, and we'll be right back. And thank you for sticking with us. And we'll talk more about access centers on Mass Talk when we come back. Welcome back to Mass Talk. I'm your host, Amy Palmerino. We have been talking about issues in access corporations, public access television, and as we left off with public, educational, and government access television, which is the acronym for PEG. It's not Peggy, some woman. It actually stands for something. And I have my guests here. Let me just review them real quick so that you know, just in case you're tuning in. We have Paul Berg, who's the Executive Director of New TV in Newton. We have Keith Tebow, who is the Director of Fall River Community Television. And we have Bill August, who's an attorney representing municipalities and access corporations in cable franchise renewals, as well as Nancy Richard, who's the Executive Director for PAC TV in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So we have been talking about what is this whole access TV thing, and you know, we touched upon some of the history. We also were talking about that acronym I just told you about for PEG. So we talked about the PUG, the public and the government. We didn't really touch upon educational access. So Keith, why don't you talk about that just a little bit and tell me what is that all about?
Well, I'm fortunate in that even though I run a public access operation, it is out of a community college in Massachusetts. But educational access, as Paula mentioned about public and government, the PEG, the P-E-G, public access is primarily set aside for residents of a community, anyone in a community to use. A government access channel, by and large, is used by municipal government officials, also state officials, and federal officials looking to get information out to their constituents. The educational access part of it, the E in the PEG, centers around school districts, school departments within a specific community. On an educational access channel, you'll see high school sporting events, you'll see concerts and plays, high school students' productions and the like, programs and events centered around a school district or an educational district within a community.
Okay, so we've got the public, pretty much you got the educational, which is the educational things and even maybe lifelong learning things, as well as government, which is all of your town and local governments. And then you got the P, the public, which is pretty much everything else, so your churches and all the things. Now, one of the things that goes along with that, we are going to talk about in a few minutes, which is to exercise your right to freedom of speech, which is the other component of that. So sit on your seats. We'll talk about the soapbox in a moment. But what we want to talk about first, before we get into the content of that, is how does this whole access center thing work, okay? We're at a beautiful facility now, and you probably have one in your town. Nancy, I know that you really helped grow and build PAC TV here in Plymouth. And talk a little bit about that. You know, you got the funding. We talked a little bit about that. But how does that all begin? How do you even start to build something like that?
Well, PAC TV was formed in 1996 as a 501c3 corporation, which meant that we're a public charity. Once the corporation was formed, we took the money that was awarded to the town through the cable contract to start up the Access Center. When I first started at PAC-TV in 1997, we didn't have a facility, we didn't have office space at all, we didn't have any equipment. In fact, I was operating out of my car with a laptop computer and a cell phone. Yeah,
I feel I've heard that story before.
yeah, it's kind of legend in town. What happened was we had a certain amount of capital money that was given to us to start up because we were a brand new facility. And we renovated an old building in town, which we're in now right now. We added a studio off of the back, bought the equipment that we needed to furnish the Access Center with, and started teaching classes to people in the community how to produce their own television programs. Most of what happens here, we do government access, so we cover selectmen's meetings, town meetings, in 2 towns actually. We do Plymouth and Kingston. But we also do training classes here, a lot of training classes. We have a studio production class that runs for 8 weeks, and we have, I think, 6 or 7 rounds of that a year. We also do nonlinear editing, which means that people learn how to use the computers to edit their video footage that they shoot in the field. So it's essentially a training facility here. We have a kitchen studio, so we have cooking shows. All of this happens. So it's not just commentary on government or church services. It can also be shows like how to fix your car, how to cook Thanksgiving dinner. We've had that. It's actually great because when they come in and do that, we get to eat the food. We don't have much of a staff, actually. We only have 7 people on our staff. We serve a community with, I think there are 23,000 subscribers in the area that we serve, and we do all of that with 7 people because the producers that we train to do the video, to do their own programs, do the programming. The public access programming is done by producers, community producers, not by the staff. So that's essentially how it started up here in Plymouth.
So you don't have to have gone to a college and
Oh, no,
received a
not at all.
bachelor's
In
degree.
fact, we have people that come back who come here to do, to take our classes that are going to college to learn this, but haven't been able to get their hands on the equipment and come to our place to learn how to use the equipment because they're in a hurry and want to really learn it now and don't want to wait until their senior year before they're allowed to touch a camera. So we have an internship program that's always very busy, particularly in the summer. And since we do a magazine program, we have lots of openings for people to come in and do and to work. One of our interns really put it well. She said if I'd gone to Channel 5, I would have made copies at the copy machine and I would have been fetching coffee for people. But she was actually a news anchor. So by coming to PAC-TV, she got to do everything, and she got to use the equipment and learn how to edit and do a lot of different things. So when she'd go into class to report what she was doing, all of her classmates were very envious because she got to do all of that while they were making photocopies of scripts.
So it's very open. Anyone who is a resident of your town or in your studio
Has free
in your
access.
town has
to-
access.
Yeah.
Or anyone who is a student here, or anyone who works for an organization within the town. That's why we have the word access. It is a studio which truly provides access to anyone and everyone who will do the training. And you see amazing stories of high school kids who come to a studio and they learn about video and they learn about technology and they get free training, and it brings, and senior citizens can come here. So it can be a very vibrant community center. And we see that in town after town after town. And in terms of the informational value, without it, you would not have live or even taped coverage of your boards of selectmen and school committees. And it's often observed that is a real watershed in municipal government in our cities and towns, because it opens up the workings and meetings of government. So that's a big change.
How many of you have had a story where someone was watching a live selectmen's meeting and something bothered them and they hopped in their car and drove
Yes.
on down
Right.
so they
Happens
could
all
go
the
up to
time.
the public meeting? But Bill, you said something really important, that it's a community center. And
Right.
we really are a community center. I think that a lot of the activities that go on in an access center that are important never make it on TV. I've seen this happen when there's been divisive issues in the community and we have a pro-con type discussion and you get all these people working together on a television program and all of a sudden you see two opponents talking with one another over in the shadows after the show is over, and you've got two people that probably never would have met and talked to each other before. So it really builds community. And it's really, and then the other important word that I don't think I've heard maybe once is volunteer. Because, you know, we probably have a number of people on our staff that equals the entire staff in Natalie Jacobson's office. Okay? We produce 3 television channels 24/7 with brand new programming every week with 7 staff members and literally, in some cases, hundreds of volunteers. And that's what it's all about.
That is what it's all about, and it adds a lot of value to every town and city that has a local studio. I think it's a very valuable and vibrant part of modern and contemporary municipal organization and community life.
One of the things that we discovered when we were going through renewal is that we sent out a request for letters of support, and we got back 53 letters from various nonprofit organizations in town and groups and organizations that were not necessarily nonprofits and businesses supporting us because we've done work to get their messages out to the community. The United Way, the Chamber of Commerce, they all use our channels.
Right.
So it's not just churches, it's not just any one particular group or of community members, it's everybody in the community that uses it. Yeah, the fire department comes in.
But if I'm listening to you right now, Nancy, I'm saying to myself, oh, I couldn't do that. You know, it's so television, it must be all these buttons and wires and cords and strange terms. And
one of the things that's absolutely amazing to me is when there's a woman down in the Cape who is 96 years old and she runs a camera. I can't believe it, but she comes in and runs a camera. You know, somebody showed her how to do it, and she has her place, and she does her zooming in and zooming out and what she does.
It's not that difficult.
No, it isn't that difficult, and you become part of a crew. It's not just you all by yourself that has to produce the program.
And it's really a way to create community spirit.
It is.
That's what we're doing. Well, we're going to take another short break, but this has really been wonderful to open up our eyes on what is community television and can I do it? You know, can someone sitting there right now, can you make your own television show? And yes, you can. So we'll be right back. Thank you so much for being here for Mass Talk, and we'll see you after the break.
Only on public access.
Welcome back to Mass Talk. We have been talking about a lot of things with Access Centers and Access Corporations, your public educational and government television station, and that you're watching this on right now. And really, I want to kind of wrap things up a little bit. Now, I can't believe people can actually be involved in this. Like, just people. You don't have to go to some, university or whatnot. And it's really the access of the community to help create community spirit. And just give me a quick synopsis of how people can get involved and what they should do. Like right now, they're sitting on the couch, like, what do I do?
Well, I'm sure there's information either on this channel that you're watching or in your town website information where you can get in touch with your local access center and find out how to get involved.
Okay, so definitely there should be ways in the community. There maybe it's a bulletin board message
If all
after
else,
this.
if all else fails, call the town manager.
Great. Now, we touched a little bit upon that this is an electronic soapbox and that people can really exercise their right to freedom of speech. In future shows that we have, we will be talking about different types of programming and whatnot and First Amendment rights. But we know that that is something that people can get involved with, and that's one of the things that you're allowed to do on public access. But there are some threats to public access, which we're not going to touch upon right now. You're going to need to wait to our show next month. But there are some legislative things that are going to be happening. And that's something that people really should talk with their local government about, whatnot. Correct? Am I?
Federal legislation is before Congress now that would eliminate the cable television local franchising process, which brings about public access, and it would put cable under federal standards, which would greatly weaken community television.
And I'm sure that you at home do not want to see that happen, because we just told you you can get involved and you can do your own show with your friends, your family, neighbors, and whatnot. So we definitely, I'm sure that you don't want to see that happen. So you want to stay tuned for our next show. But I want to thank my guests. Thank you so much, Paul Berg, Keith Tebow, Bill August, and Nancy Richard. Thank you for talking about this, which is a very important topic in the community. It's really how to bridge a community together. And I want to thank you for being here. And I want to thank all of you. Thanks. I want to thank all of you for sticking in there with us and watching this important program, because you may have watched some of the shows, whether it's a government meeting, whether it is a talk show, and you said, you know, how could I get involved? So please contact your local access center, or if you can't find out information, contact your local town hall or city hall and see how you can get involved. We are part of the group Mass Access, or I am the program. It's you can reach us on the web at www.massaccess.org. And it'll give you more information how you can join our organization, which is the Massachusetts chapter for the Alliance for Community Media, which represents community televisions throughout the country. So thank you so much for tuning in to us, and we'll talk to you again on Mass Talk.